what we need to pay attention to in terms of working with dimensions, particularly if you're going to use work points, is your naming convention. What do I want to name my work points? You have to be able to identify what those work points are based upon their names. So coming up with the naming convention ahead of time makes things a whole lot easier, particularly if they're logical. If I go back over here to Inventor and I look at my work points, you're going to see that in my payload variant, overall height 2, payload height 2, payload height 1, payload width, payload width. I'm always giving it an understandable name of what it's doing, and similarly, I'm also putting the number or the iteration, the sequence of it at the end, so that way I can quickly, if I need to interrogate the name of the work point, I can always look at that last character to identify if it's a number 1, if it's a number 2, or whatever the number might be. Okay, so that's just good practice. Is always name your features something logical so you can identify them, and always put the numbers at the very end. It makes things a whole lot easier in terms of writing your code. Okay, going back to my add dimensions here. Once I have that, then I need to do something very special, because those points are 3D work points in a 3D model. What I need to do is I need to bring those work points over to my 2D environment. Okay, I need to bring them over for my 2D environment, and that's what this proxies is all about. I need to create a work point proxy inside of my drawing representative to the location of that work point that's actually my 3D model. Okay, so how do we do that? If I go back over here to Inventor, you're going to see that in my create linear dimension function here, one of the first things that I'm doing is I'm grabbing my transient geometry, and then I'm starting to I'm accessing the work points found in the actual occurrences, which is in the 3D models. And then right here, I'm creating proxies of those work points. So I'm creating geometry proxy of those work points inside of my 2D drawing. Then what I'm doing is I'm placing center marks on those proxies. Now, I have found later on that that's not actually necessary. If you have the proxies, you don't necessarily need to have the center marks. I just found it to be just another method of getting to the same point, another way of getting to the same location. So I have the work point proxies, I'm laying down some center marks, and then I'm using those center marks to understand where the beginning point of my dimension is and where the end point of my dimension is. Now, one thing that I am doing here is once I have a center mark and I create it on that proxy, I'm going back and I'm turning off the visibility of those center marks. So you can't even see them. They exist in the drawing, but they're not visible to the human that might have to look at them. So I have those points, those center marks rather. Then I just need to identify what's the orientation, and then from there I can actually start laying down my linear dimension right here. So where is my point of where am I going to place the text? Where am I going to start the dimension? Where am I going to end the dimension? And what is it? Is it a vertical or is it a horizontal dimension? Those are the only 4 inputs that I need to create a linear dimension. And then after, I'm coming back and I'm centering the dimension so it's perfectly centered within the start point and the end point, so it looks really good. And that's it. That's really all it takes. Sheets, views, parts lists, balloons, and dimensions. Because, guys, remember what I said, creating these items, sheets, views, parts lists, and sketch symbols is rather simple to do. The more difficult tasks are those dimensions and balloons. And that's where you need to weigh out, is this something that I should accommodate programmatically with my automation? Maybe I should just do some consistent dimensions. If overall height and width and length are always there, place those, but then let your end users place all those other dimensions that might be a little bit more challenging to identify within the 3D models themselves. Let a human being actually take care of those more difficult tasks. All right. And then lastly, external data sources. I touched on that in terms of accessing information from a spreadsheet, a database, or an XML in terms of working with your dimensions.